Hi guys, so today's video is going to be the first of some of the end of the year videos. I feel like it's crazy that it's basically already the end of the year, but the holidays are almost upon us and it's time to start looking back at some of my reading from this last year. So at the end of 2019, I had a few different videos about series. I had one about series that I wanted to finish, and I had one about series I wanted to continue. I decided to combine those two videos as far as reflecting on those to see how well I did. So it's kind of like a stats video. We're gonna go through and see how many of the series that I had said I wanted to finish and continue that I actually did, and then what additional ones did I add on. Before mentioning what books were on these lists, I do want to give a little heads up about one of them, which would be King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This is technically the first book in its own duology, but it is, I treated it like anyway, a continuation of the Grisha verse because it does take place in that world. So even though it's kind of its own series and technically the first, I included it here instead of including it in my series I wanted to start. That said, I'm going to read off the ones that I had mentioned in those videos, and then after going through those, I'm going to talk about the ones that I ended up adding on or swapping out. But starting with the ones that I had said at the end of 2019 I wanted to continue and finish, we have First Law, Shadow of the Fox, Red Queen, Lunar Chronicles, Ever the Hunted, King of Scars and Language of Thorns, Ash Princess, Blood Song, Queen of the Tearling, Storm My Archive, And I Darken, Strongbow Saga, Arcanum Unbounded, Malazan Book of the Fallen, Fables, Crown of Feathers, Temeraire, Assassin's Apprentice, Vicious, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and The Shattered Realms. And of those 21, I got around to 9 of them. There were 3 that I decided I didn't really actually want to continue on with. I did have additional series that I started and finished, so I'll get to those ones too, but of the ones that I had said I wanted to get to, I got to 9. The 3 that I decided I didn't want to continue on with were The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I do not dislike these. In fact, I remember quite enjoying them, but the series is very, very long and they're fun, but I have so many other books that I always found myself prioritizing over Dresden, and I think Dresden is going to be one of those series that, I don't know, maybe I get around to later. I also decided I didn't really want to continue on with Serpent and Dove. It was fun. That's kind of it for me. It was fun, but I think that could have just been a standalone for my tastes. It's very heavy on the romance, and I occasionally do like books with fantasy romance rather than just fantasy with a romantic subplot. This one I felt was quite heavy on the romance, which is totally fine, but I just didn't need more. The other one, and I'm so sorry because I know this is going to break some hearts, was Theft of Swords. I decided I didn't really want to continue on with that one. I have heard really good things about Michael J. Sullivan's other series, so I might pick those up. But Theft of Swords, the first one, again, there's kind of a theme here. It was fun. I didn't have anything that I hated about it. I remember there being one scene in the first book that was a little strange. I'll link my review for that one down below if you're interested. But I think if I'm going to pick up more Sullivan, I don't want to actually pick up the rest of this series. I would rather pick up something else by them. Getting into now the series that I completed and continued on with. I'm going to start with the continued on since that list is a little shorter. I did continue on with Malazan Book of the Fallen. I am so sorry to the really nice fans out there like Andy and Philip and Brittany and Alan because this is not the series for me, and that's okay. I did continue on. I was determined to give the first 2 a try because I have heard a lot of people in the fandom say the first one is the weakest. I know I'm never gonna like the series. I know that's kind of a controversial statement, but the storytelling, unless the storytelling drastically changes and suddenly Steven Erikson writes completely differently, I'm not gonna care for the series. I don't think it's bad because I think it's subjective what is good and what is bad. It's just so not to my tastes, and I'm really sorry. Next up would be Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I continued on with this one and read Vengeful. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. This might be my favorite V.E. Schwab work. I really like the way she embraces the split timeline. enjoy the villainous characters. I have the unpopular opinion of liking the second one more than the first one. It seems like most people like the first more, but I really enjoyed the second one, and I hope she writes that third one someday. I also continued on with the Crown of Feathers series by Nikki Pao-Preto. The second one is called Heart of Flames. This is a young adult fantasy story. It follows a group of Phoenix writers who are trying to get their homeland back, essentially. And I really enjoyed the second one. It's pretty chunky for a young adult fantasy. I really enjoyed the new perspective that you get in the second one. Kind of a villainous perspective, kind of, sort of. I won't say too much because I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't read all of the first one yet. But I love the phoenixes. I think that they're such a fun mythological creature to have in a fantasy story. I don't feel like we see them very often. I like our main characters. They're almost the epitome of good guys, but this somewhat kind of sort of villainous character has so much influence on one of them, and that character is fascinating to me. I think that it improved the series significantly. I liked the first one, but I think this new perspective added a great flavor to the story, and I can't wait to see where the third one goes. Switching over to the series that I completed from my original 2019 list, we have the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Overall, I do really like this trilogy. I love the second book so much. The characters, it's such a character-driven story. You hear people say essentially the same thing when they talk about First Law, I find, is that it's really character-driven and that Glocta's amazing, Logan's so cool. You hear the same things. I am not of a very different opinion. I have a lot of the same things to say as well. I do find that the trilogy's conclusion was a little disappointing for me, but I still really enjoyed First Law. Still one of my favorite trilogies. The character work is next to none. Next up, we have the Shadow of the Fox trilogy. I'm super glad that I ended up finishing this one. I was a little nervous because I did not love the second one. I read it and I was like, I think it was necessary, but I hope it changes in book 3, and it did. It had a lot of the things I liked about book 1 that came back, and then some. Feels very anime-esque. The third one, I liked a lot. I really liked it. It's very fast. It's like one giant battle, which was really cool, while also having some really touching emotional moments in it. I really liked the conclusion. Next up, we have Ever the Hunted by Erin Summerall. I thought this was a trilogy, but it turns out the other book in this series is actually kind of a companion novel. So really, it's more like a duology. And I finished that duology. I think the book could have been a standalone, and I think I would have liked it more. There were some tropes used in the second book that I am really not a fan of, and I think a lot of other people really aren't a fan of either. And that was a little disappointing because I actually really liked the couple in this story. So it was fine. I would definitely read something else by this author. I mentioned before that I wanted to get around to King of Scars and Language of Thorns. Didn't get around to Language of Thorns, but King of Scars, oh my gosh. I really loved the first half. I was thinking, oh man, this might be my favorite Leigh Bardugo book. And then the second half, I hated it so much, in that same way that I tend to dislike continuations, where I feel like it almost kind of sort of tweaks things from the original story. So we have chronologically, the Grisha trilogy comes first, Shadow and Bone trilogy, and then you have the Six of Crows duology, and then King of Scars. And King of Scars is more closely tied to Grisha as far as tone and the main character, although you do have another character from the Six of Crows duology. But either way, the first half I felt really comfortable with, because what I liked about the Six of Crows duology is it was distanced enough from the Shadow and Bone trilogy where it didn't feel like it was going to disrupt that trilogy. In fact, the little tiny tidbits from the original trilogy I thought were incorporated really nicely. So I was excited about King of Scars. The first half was feeling that way, and then the second half, I just didn't like the direction it went. I didn't like the direction it went in at all. But darn it, I still kind of want to read the next one. Next, we have the Ash Princess trilogy by Laura Sebastian. I was blown away by the third one. I enjoyed the first two. They're a little tropey. They're kind of familiar. We follow a character whose homeland was conquered, and she was kept alive to use against her own people. So if they tried to rebel, they'd publicly harm her in some way to try and keep the people peaceful, and her life sucks. And at the beginning of the first one, she gets a spark of hope and decides that she doesn't want to be used against her people anymore. She wants to work from the inside to help them. So there's a lot of politicking, a lot of sneaking around, and like I said, a lot of tropes. And I blew through that first one. I ate it up, had such a good time with it. Liked the second one, although I would say there were some things about the first that I think I may have enjoyed more. And then the third one, I thought it was going to be like that, where it was fun, a good time, I was going to enjoy it. But the third one, I was just so emotionally connected to things that were happening. I was really surprised. I wasn't sure about the choice of villain that you get in the third one. I was really hesitant. I didn't think I was going to like it, and I loved it. Now I'm so excited for the other things that this author puts out because I loved that conclusion. And then now we have the Stormlight Archive with Rhythm of War. So technically this one should have been in the continued because it's the last of what's currently out. It doesn't matter. Either way, this book was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I think maybe we'll see. It's hard to tell what people are going to think about it, but I kind of think that this is going to be the fan favorite overall. I love Way of Kings, and this one is up there with Way of Kings for me. I thought the pacing was fantastic. I thought the character work was fantastic. It was so emotional. The tension in the book was fantastic. The world building I thought was good, but also I would say like the Cosmere world building also was good. It was fantastic. I loved it so much. Now for the continuations and series completed that weren't on the list. We have Curse Breakers by Bridget Kemmerer, and the third one's coming out soon. I'm so excited. I loved the first one, and then the second one, I liked it, but it kind of, for me, focused on characters I didn't love as much as the characters from the first book. I am definitely excited to see where the third book goes, but I think that this one had a little bit of middle book syndrome for me simply because I didn't like the characters as much. I also started and completed all of the Queens of Renthia series. I loved the first two so much. You've heard me probably talk about this trilogy a lot this year, but I did not really love the end of the trilogy, which is always a letdown. I still highly recommend it simply because the setting is fantastic. You technically could read the first two and then just stop because they're fairly self-contained. But I still think you should read the third one because you obviously might feel very differently about that third one than I did. But of the three, the second one was my favorite. I just like the setting so much, and I did come to really like the characters. I also read Spin the Dawn and its sequel, Unravel the Dusk. I was surprised by how much I liked this. I don't know that it does a lot of anything new. It's kind of a comfy, familiar story, and you have the Mulan trope where the character has to disguise themselves as a boy and go in place of a male family member to try and protect them. But in this case, instead of going off to war, they're going off to compete to become the emperor's tailor, basically. And then the story has a shift where at one point it becomes a traveling love story, which I don't think a lot of people realized it was going to be. I myself was not expecting that, but I liked it, and then I was not so sure how I was going to feel in the first part of the second book, but I did really like the conclusion. To me, it feels kind of like a little bit like a fairy tale, so if you're looking for something that feels fairy tale-esque, kind of whimsical, you're probably gonna like this one. And then last for the series I completed would be the Grisha trilogy. I decided to do a reread of this, and you know what? I liked it even more the second time around. I know it's a very unpopular opinion. A lot of people feel it's way too tropey. They think the main character is super stupid, and they just feel like it's not that creative. They don't really like the world that much. They hate the Darkling. So I know a lot of people don't really love this series, but I like it. And I'm just feeling Malaz and Book of the Fallen fans being like, how? And I understand. I know what it's like when you're like, how can you have liked this and not that? But what can I say? I am a Grisha fan. That's it for the series that I continued and completed. Let me know how you've done with your 2020 reading goals. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.